city buzzed with its usual frenetic energy, the hum of traffic and murmur of countless conversations weaving a tapestry of sound that cocooned the apartment building in its urban embrace. Laura Hollis stood in the doorway of her new apartment, taking in the polished hardwood floors and minimalist decor, a sharp contrast to the cluttered dorm room she'd left behind. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was her fresh start, a new chapter far from the mess of her recent past. As she unpacked boxes and arranged her belongings, a cold shiver ran down her spine, not from the chill of the apartment, but from the inexplicable feeling that she was not alone. She brushed it off as nerves. After all, moving to a new city, starting college, and adjusting to independence were bound to be overwhelming. That night, as she settled into her new bed, Laura's phone rang. The display showed an unknown number. Frowning, she answered, only to hear a breathless whisper on the other end. "Beware the shadows, they watch." She never left. The line went dead. Laura's pulse quickened. It was likely a prank, some local kids testing the boundaries of her new solitude. Shaking off the unsettling call, she tried to focus on her studies, but the whisper lingered in her mind like an unwelcome guest. Days turned into weeks, and the calls persisted. Each time, the same disembodied voice would whisper cryptic messages that seemed more like warnings than threats. "She's still here," it would say, or "You are next." Laura's initial annoyance gave way to fear as the calls became increasingly frequent, each whisper a cold reminder of a presence she couldn't see but could certainly feel. Determined to uncover the source of these chilling messages, Laura began investigating her apartment building's history. Her quest led her to the building's old records, where she discovered that the apartment she now occupied had previously been rented by Eliza Thornton, a name that came with its own shadowy reputation. Eliza had been a reclusive artist, known for her eerie, abstract paintings that depicted unsettling scenes of darkness and despair. Laura learned that Eliza had disappeared mysteriously 5 years prior, leaving behind only an empty apartment and a trail of unanswered questions. No one knew what had happened to her. Rumors swirled about her reclusive nature and her odd behavior, but the police had found no clues. With her curiosity piqued and her fears mounting, Laura dug deeper. She visited local archives, spoke with former tenants, and even sought out Eliza's old friends and acquaintances. Each step of the investigation uncovered pieces of Eliza's troubled past, her artistic obsessions, her increasingly erratic behavior, and the strange, unexplained events that surrounded her disappearance. One evening, as Laura reviewed her notes and photographs in her dimly lit apartment, the phone rang again. The whisper on the other end was softer but more insistent. "Find the paintings. The answers are hidden in them." Laura's hands trembled as she listened to the cryptic message. She knew she had to follow this new lead. The paintings, which had been packed away in storage, might hold the key to understanding the voice and the mystery of Eliza's disappearance. She retrieved the paintings from the storage room, their haunting depictions of shadowy figures and ghostly apparitions reflecting the darkness that had begun to seep into her own life. Each painting seemed to convey a sense of foreboding, as if they were windows into a world she was not meant to see. Laura meticulously examined each piece, searching for any clues or messages that might explain the whispers. One painting in particular caught her eye, a dark, swirling vortex with a ghostly figure trapped within. The figure's eyes seemed to follow her, a silent plea for help. As Laura studied the painting, a chilling realization dawned on her. The ghostly figure resembled the whispers she had been hearing on the phone. It was as if the painting was a direct connection to the spectral presence that had been tormenting her. Determined to confront the malevolent force, Laura returned to the apartment building's basement, where she had discovered a hidden door during her earlier investigation. The door led to an abandoned storage area filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. In the dim light of her flashlight, Laura found a dusty, old journal hidden behind a stack of crates. The journal belonged to Eliza Thornton. Its pages revealed a descent into madness, a record of her growing obsession with the shadows she believed were watching her. The final entries were desperate and fragmented, describing a dark entity that had begun to haunt her and whisper warnings of impending doom. As Laura read the journal, the whispers on the phone grew louder and more frantic. The voice seemed to be pleading with her now, urging her to escape before it was too late. But Laura was resolute. She had to understand the truth and free herself from the curse that bound her. The climax of Laura's investigation came on a stormy night when the whispers reached their crescendo. The apartment was filled with an eerie, palpable sense of dread as Laura confronted the specter of Eliza Thornton in the dim glow of a flickering lamp. The apparition emerged from the shadows, her face a mask of sorrow and rage. Laura faced the ghostly figure, demanding to know why she was being tormented. Eliza's spectral form seemed to waver between anger and despair as she revealed the truth. Her disappearance had been the result of a malevolent entity that had trapped her in a never-ending cycle of torment. The entity had latched onto Laura, seeking a new victim to continue its reign of terror. In a desperate bid to break the cycle, Laura gathered all the paintings and the journal and performed a ritual described in the journal's final pages. As she chanted the incantation, the apartment was engulfed in a blinding light, and the whispers grew deafening. The entity, now exposed, was forced to retreat into the darkness from which it had come. When the light faded, Laura found herself alone in her apartment once more. The whispers had ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. She had survived the ordeal, but the memory of the haunting whispers and the ghostly presence remained with her. Laura's investigation had not only uncovered the truth about Eliza Thornton, but had also allowed her to confront her own fears and insecurities. She emerged from the experience stronger and more determined, with a newfound appreciation for the mysteries that lay hidden in the shadows. As she looked out over the city from her apartment window, Laura felt a sense of resolution. The whispers of the past had been silenced, and she was finally free to begin her new chapter, unburdened by the ghosts of the past. Mark Hollister's hands trembled as he adjusted the soil around the base of the new rosebush he'd just planted. It was a beautiful spring morning in Ashford, and the sun bathed the garden in a warm, golden light. Mark took a deep breath, enjoying the tranquility that gardening brought him, a welcome escape from the demands of his job as a high school teacher. But the serenity of the morning was abruptly shattered by the sudden, harsh ring of his phone. Frowning, he wiped his hands on his gardening apron and picked up the phone. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. Mark answered, expecting a telemarketer or a wrong number, but was met with a heavy, labored breathing on the other end. "Hello?" Mark's voice wavered, but there was no response, just the unsettling sound of someone struggling to breathe. After a few moments, the line went dead. Mark stared at the phone, a chill creeping down his spine. It was probably a prank, he thought, shaking his head. He returned to his gardening, but the eerie breathing lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over the otherwise pleasant day. Over the following weeks, the strange calls persisted. Each time, the same heavy breathing filled the line, growing more ragged and desperate. Mark tried to ignore it, attributing it to some sick joke or a malfunctioning phone line. However, when students from his school began to go missing, the calls took on a more ominous tone. At first, the disappearances were chalked up to typical teenage rebellion or runaways. But as the list of missing students grew, the town's anxiety mounted. Mark's own students were among those who vanished, and the sense of dread became personal. He couldn't shake the feeling that the breathing calls were somehow connected to the mysterious disappearances. Desperate for answers, Mark began researching the history of his house and the surrounding area. His search led him to the old cemetery on the outskirts of town, where he discovered that the grave he had disturbed while gardening belonged to Lydia Graves, a woman who had been buried under grim circumstances. Lydia Graves had been a resident of Ashford in the early 20th century. Accused of witchcraft, she had been unjustly executed, and her grave had become a place of fear and superstition. Mark's inadvertent disturbance of her resting place had unleashed a curse that had lain dormant for decades. As he pieced together the historical records and spoke to local historians, it became clear that Lydia's spirit was the source of the haunting phone calls. The calls had begun shortly after Mark's disturbance of Lydia's grave, and the timing of the student disappearances was too coincidental to ignore. The vengeful spirit of Lydia Graves was manifesting through the heavy breathing, seeking to avenge her wrongful death and punish those who had disturbed her grave. Determined to put an end to the terror, Mark sought out experts in local folklore and ancient curses. He learned that to break the curse, he would need to perform a ritual to appease Lydia's spirit and restore her grave. Mark gathered the necessary items, a ceremonial dagger, a vial of holy water, and a few other artifacts, and prepared for the confrontation. The night of the ritual was stormy, with lightning flashing across the sky and the wind howling through the trees. Mark arrived at the cemetery, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The graveyard, shrouded in darkness, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. As he began the ritual, chanting the incantations and sprinkling the holy water, the atmosphere grew heavier. The breathing sounds grew louder, echoing through the cemetery. Shadows danced around him, and the air felt charged with an oppressive force. Lydia's spirit materialized before him, a ghostly figure draped in tattered clothing, her face twisted with anguish and rage. Mark confronted Lydia, explaining that he had unintentionally disturbed her grave and was seeking to make amends. He pleaded for her forgiveness, offering the ceremonial dagger as a symbol of his sincerity. Lydia's spirit seemed to waver, her anger battling with her sadness. As Mark completed the ritual, a blinding light enveloped the cemetery. The oppressive weight of the curse began to lift, and the heavy breathing on the phone ceased. The ground trembled, and Lydia's spirit slowly dissipated, her sorrowful cries fading into the night. When the light faded and the storm subsided, Mark found himself alone in the cemetery, the air now calm and still. The curse had been lifted, and the missing students were found safe, though deeply shaken by their ordeal. Mark returned to his life in Ashford with a renewed sense of purpose. The haunting calls had ended, and the spirit of Lydia Graves had finally found peace. The town slowly returned to its quiet routine, but the memory of the curse and the eerie breathing would forever remain a part of Mark's life. As he tended to his garden once more, Mark reflected on the events that had transpired. The experience had been harrowing, but it had also taught him the importance of understanding and respecting the past. The echoes of Lydia Graves' curse had served as a reminder of the consequences of disturbing the forgotten and the power of making things right. In the end, the silent breather was no longer a threat, but a tragic reminder of the weight of history and the need for redemption. Mark's life resumed its quiet pace, but the lessons learned from his encounter with Lydia Graves would linger in his heart forever. Sarah Thompson had always been fascinated by history, but nothing could have prepared her for the inheritance of the old family mansion. When the letter arrived from the solicitor, informing her of her distant relative's death and her newfound possession, she was both intrigued and apprehensive. The mansion, located on the outskirts of a small remote town, had been abandoned for years, its grandeur faded and its secrets hidden beneath layers of dust and decay. Upon arrival, Sarah was struck by the mansion's imposing presence. The sprawling estate, with its grand facade and towering spires, seemed to loom over her, casting long shadows in the laky afternoon light. The air was thick with a musty odor, and the once lush gardens were now overgrown and wild. As she unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside, a chill ran down her spine. The interior of the mansion was a mixture of faded opulence and neglect. Ornate chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals dust-covered and dim. The floors creaked beneath her feet as she walked through the long, shadowy hallways lined with dusty portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Despite the mansion's state of disrepair, Sarah felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if the house was calling to her. The first few days in the mansion were uneventful. Sarah spent her time cataloging her belongings and trying to make the house livable. However, it wasn't long before the phone calls began. The first call came in the middle of the night, waking her from a restless sleep. The caller ID displayed an unknown number, and when Sarah answered, she was met with a series of strange mechanical whispers and unsettling noises. The breathy, distorted sounds left her feeling unnerved and unsettled. Sarah dismissed the calls as pranksters or a malfunctioning phone line, but the calls continued, growing more frequent and disturbing. Each time, the mechanical whispers became more intense, as if the entity on the other end was trying to convey a message through its distorted voice. As the days passed, the calls began to take a toll on her sanity, leaving her feeling increasingly paranoid and isolated. Determined to understand the source of the calls, Sarah began to explore the mansion's hidden rooms and forgotten passages. Her research into the mansion's history revealed that it had been in her family for generations, but many details had been lost to time. Old family records and dusty journals hinted at a dark and troubled past, but the specifics remained elusive. As Sarah delved deeper into the mansion's secrets, she discovered hidden rooms behind false walls and concealed doors. Each discovery seemed to reveal more about her family's past, but also more about the malevolent entity that haunted the mansion. The mechanical whispers on the phone began to correspond with eerie noises she heard throughout the house. Footsteps in empty hallways, creaking doors, and strange, disembodied laughter. One evening, while exploring a particularly dark and neglected part of the mansion, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden chamber. The room was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets, and at its center stood a large, ornate mirror. The mirror's surface was cloudy with age, but as Sarah approached, she noticed something etched into the frame, a series of cryptic symbols and names. As she studied the mirror, she felt a cold breeze behind her and heard the mechanical whispers growing louder. The whispers seemed to form words, repeating a name she didn't recognize, Lydia Graves. The name was familiar from her research, but the significance remained unclear. Sarah's investigation led her to the town's local historian, who revealed that Lydia Graves had been a distant ancestor, accused of dark practices and cursed by the family. The curse was said to have bound Lydia's spirit to the mansion, and her malevolent presence had tormented the family for generations. The curse was a result of a grave injustice, and Lydia's spirit sought revenge against those who had wronged her. Armed with this new knowledge, Sarah set out to confront the Silent One and end the cycle of torment. She researched ancient rituals and sought guidance from experts in local folklore. The ritual required specific items, candles, sacred herbs, and a special incantation to appease Lydia's spirit and lift the curse. The night of the ritual arrived, and the mansion seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Sarah prepared the ritual space in the hidden chamber, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. As she began the incantation, the mechanical whispers grew louder and more frantic. Shadows danced around her, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive force. Lydia's spirit materialized before Sarah, a ghostly figure shrouded in darkness. Her eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, and her presence radiated a palpable sense of anguish and rage. Sarah confronted Lydia, explaining that she had come to make amends and end the torment that had plagued her family. The confrontation was intense, with Lydia's spirit manifesting its anger and sadness. The room was filled with the cacophony of mechanical whispers and the ghostly figure's mournful cries. Sarah continued the ritual, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. As Sarah completed the incantation and offered the ritual items, a blinding light filled the chamber. Lydia's spirit seemed to waver and then slowly dissipate, her cries fading into silence. The heavy atmosphere lifted, and the mansion's oppressive grip seemed to release. With the curse lifted, the phone calls ceased, and the eerie noises throughout the mansion grew silent. Sarah's investigation had uncovered the truth behind her family's dark history, and she had confronted the malevolent entity that had tormented them for generations. The mansion, though still old and decrepit, felt lighter and more peaceful. Sarah's confrontation with the Silent One had brought closure to the family's haunting past. As she looked out over the sprawling estate, she felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The echoes of silence had replaced the mechanical whispers, and the mansion's dark history was now a part of the past. Sarah's journey had been one of discovery, bravery, and resolution, and she had finally found peace within the walls of her inherited home.
Thank you for joining us on this spine-tingling journey. As Sarah uncovered the sinister secrets of her inherited mansion, we hope you found the experience as haunting as we did. If the echoes of this story linger with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Leave a comment below with your thoughts and theories. We'd love to hear what you think about the eerie mysteries we've uncovered tonight. Until next time, remember, in the world of horror, the silence is never truly empty.